A lone Russian frigate slices through icy waters while a U.S. carrier strike group steams 500 kilometers away, its Aegis radars sweeping the horizon for threats that move at predictable speeds. But the radar didn't see what was coming next. One missile, traveling at 9 times the speed of sound, closes that gap in minutes, its plasma sheath swallowing radar waves whole. In the time it takes a watch officer to blink, the era of American carrier supremacy just got punched in the throat. Because Russia poured resources into the 3M-22 Zircon, but Western intelligence underestimated how fast production would scale. So now entire fleets face a weapon that makes billion-dollar ships look like targets in a shooting gallery. Picture the Admiral Gorshkov-class frigate rocking gently as its vertical launch cells erupt in flame. In September 2025, during Zapad drills, the Admiral Golovko fired a Zircon into the Barents Sea that slammed a designated target with a direct hit. Russian military footage shows the streak ripping across the sky faster than any conventional anti-ship missile ever could. Because this thing uses a scramjet engine after an initial rocket boost, it sustains hypersonic cruise at altitudes around 28 kilometers before diving, but defenders get maybe 15 seconds of warning once it drops low. So the math shifts from layered intercept to pure survival scramble. Those same frigates aren't the only launch platforms anymore. Yasenem nuclear submarines like the Perm, launched in 2025, now carry Zircons in their tubes, giving Russia silent underwater shooters that can pop up anywhere. And in early 2026, Ukrainian Air Force reports confirmed ground-based mobile launchers on the Crimean Peninsula firing them deep into Ukraine. A breakthrough in production hit by the end of 2025, with volumes climbing year over year. Because Moscow ordered dozens annually and factories delivered, but the real game-changer is mobility. So a truck-mounted system in contested waters or near coastlines turns any shoreline into a carrier death trap. What happens when these launchers start appearing in the South China Sea under Allied flags? Keep watching. The Zircon has already tasted real combat. In 2025 strikes on Ukraine's Sumy region, Russian forces used the missile originally built to hunt American carriers against ground infrastructure. Forensic experts in Kiev identified wreckage with 3M-22 markings. Earlier attempts on Kiev showed mixed results, with some Patriots claiming intercepts when the missile slows in terminal phase. But the kinetic punch remains terrifying. A 300 to 400 kilogram warhead arriving at Mach 5+ delivers energy equivalent to a small truck bomb, but concentrated into a needle of pure velocity. Because hypersonic weapons trade some maneuverability at peak speed for raw destructive power, but Russian operators learn to time the dive. So one successful hit on a carrier's flight deck doesn't just damage it. It turns a floating airfield into a smoking wreck that can't recover aircraft. Now zoom out to the open ocean where American carriers operate. A Nimitz or Ford-class group relies on destroyers forming a protective screen, their standard missile 6 interceptors ready for ballistic threats. But the Zircon flies a depressed trajectory, hugging the atmosphere, creating that plasma cocoon that blinds incoming radar while it maneuvers. Defense analysts calculate reaction windows collapsing to seconds once the missile is inside 100 kilometers. Because even if Aegis picks it up late, the interceptor needs time to accelerate and match paths. But at those closing speeds, the Zircon covers 20 kilometers while operators argue over the blip. So saturation attacks become the nightmare. A handful of frigates or subs ripple-firing Zircons could overwhelm the screen before the carrier's own point defenses engage. Russian media boasts 1 or 2 could mission kill a supercarrier. Independent wargames suggest the number might be higher, but the trend is unmistakable: surface groups are losing their invulnerability. This isn't just one weapon. It fits into a pattern of hypersonic posturing. Kinchel air-launched versions, or Reshnik ground systems, all part of announcements claiming 1,000 hypersonic weapons annually. Geopolitical flexes during exercises send a clear message to Washington: your power projection tool, the carrier battle group that won the Pacific in World War II and deterred the Soviets, now sails into kill zones. Because China watches closely with its own hypersonic programs, but Russia fielded first and proved it in combat. So alliances question American extended deterrence when a single volley from a stealthy platform could sink the flagship. Carriers suddenly need to stay farther back, relying more on aircraft and submarines, shrinking their influence in littoral waters where crises ignite. The US Navy knows the clock is ticking. Missile Defense Agency officials have admitted gaps against maneuvering hypersonics. Upgrades to Aegis and new directed energy weapons like lasers are in testing, promising to burn through incoming threats at the speed of light. But deployment timelines stretch years while Russian production ramps, because budget fights in Washington delay next-generation defenses, but field reports from Ukraine show even advanced systems struggle with saturation and decoys. So American strategists quietly shift doctrine toward distributed lethality, unmanned vessels, and undersea dominance. The Zircon didn't sink a carrier yet in open conflict. But its existence forces a re-evaluation of every forward deployment from the Mediterranean to the Indo-Pacific. One frigate with a half-dozen missiles can make an admiral hesitate. Look closer at the engineering that makes this possible. The scramjet ignites at supersonic speeds, sipping fuel efficiently enough for those claimed 1,000-kilometer reaches, though real-world figures likely sit closer to 500 to 700 in anti-ship mode. It can hit both sea and land targets, giving versatility that complicates enemy planning. Because the plasma sheath absorbs radio waves during cruise, early warning relies heavily on infrared satellites or over-the-horizon radars that Russia is also improving. But in terminal phase, it slows, exposes itself, and guides with seekers that have proven finicky in tests. So perfect accuracy isn't guaranteed, especially against a maneuvering carrier group. Yet the psychological and tactical weight remains enormous. A near miss that forces evasive action disrupts flight operations for hours. A hit cripples billions in assets and hundreds of sailors in one flash. Rumors swirl in defense circles about export versions or technology sharing with partners facing American naval presence. India's BrahMos program shares roots and could evolve similarly, because hypersonic proliferation doesn't respect borders, but Russia leads the operational curve right now. So smaller navies gain asymmetric tools that punch far above their weight. A single battery ashore deters a task force that once ruled unchallenged. This levels the playing field in ways that favor defenders in coastal zones and choke points like the Strait of Hormuz or Taiwan Strait. The bigger picture is a revolution in naval warfare. For decades, the US Navy projected power through visible, massive hulls that signaled resolve. The Zircon, along with quiet diesel-electrics, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and drone swarms, turns those hulls into liabilities unless protected by distance and new technology. Because sea control now demands hiding, dispersing, and striking from unexpected vectors, but carrier-centric thinking dies hard in bureaucracies. So expect more investment in submarines, arsenal ships, and hypersonic countermeasures of our own. The question isn't if one missile made the entire Navy obsolete overnight. It is whether the institution adapts before the next crisis proves the point in blood and fire. Production data suggests Russia is fielding more every month. Yasen subs entering service carry dozens. Ground launchers add mobility that satellites struggle to track in real time. Because this weapon integrates with existing command networks feeding target data from satellites, reconnaissance planes, and over-the-horizon sensors. So a lone operator hundreds of kilometers away can cue the kill shot. American carrier groups must now assume they are always being watched and potentially targeted. That changes rules of engagement, steaming profiles, and even political decisions about committing forces. Imagine a future confrontation where Russian or Allied forces ripple-fire Zircons from multiple axes. Destroyers empty their magazines trying to swat them down. CIWS guns chatter in desperation. But the speed compresses decision loops to the point where commanders rely on automation that itself can be jammed or spoofed. Because human reaction can't match physics at those velocities, but software has limits too, so the carrier, once the queen of the seas, becomes a high-value target that must be preserved at all costs, meaning it stays out of the fight longer. Power projection suffers. Allies feel exposed. Deterrence frays. Yet no technology is invincible. Terminal phase vulnerabilities, limited numbers compared to cheaper cruise missiles, and the US Navy's own quiet advances in directed energy and hypersonic glide vehicles offer counters. The real story is acceleration of an arms race that favors the side willing to innovate fastest. Russia bet heavy on hypersonics to offset conventional naval weakness. It paid off with a weapon that grabs headlines and forces Pentagon spreadsheets to recalculate risk. The ocean remains vast, but the shadows cast by these missiles grow longer. Carriers will sail on, but never again with the same swagger. Because one successful demonstration in exercises and limited combat proved the concept. But the next real-world test could rewrite naval history in a matter of minutes. The question every admiral must ask is whether their fleet is ready for a war where the first salvo arrives too fast to fully comprehend. And whether the United States can reclaim the technological edge before obsolescence becomes permanent. The clock is running, and the waves hide threats that no longer play by old rules.